What? No, I was told not to. They are now. I'd like to. Would you like a copy of them? Didn't she say, let's see, the lights go up? Yeah, there you go.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the November 14th, 2018 District Advisory Council meeting. This time we'll call the meeting to order and get started. I would like to entertain a motion if anybody's had an opportunity to review the minutes that were emailed to everyone. I'd like to entertain a motion for either approval of the minutes or if anybody noticed anything that needs to be corrected or changed, a motion for that would be appropriate at this time.
Name.
I said I motion to approve that.
Okay.
Name. I need a name.
And your name and school? Thank you. And do we have a second from Andy Erickson? All in favor? Motion carries. At this time, we will take public comment from non-DAC members on agenda items. Do we have any non-DAC members that would like to give public comment on agenda items at this time? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to our board update. I saw, oh, there she is. We have our board member, Ms. Mary Fisher.
Good evening. Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. So my update is going to be brief. I promised them no more than 2.5 minutes. Of course, we're celebrating the passage of the sales tax, which will be helping us a lot. And thanks to everyone who worked on it. It is not the end-all, be-all, but it's going to be a big help to us moving forward as our growth continues to explode. So I don't know if you heard, but just last month alone, we grew by over 1,000 students. So there were 1,800 new students come into the district, 1,800 and some odd, 833 left, so we ended up with a net increase of over 1,000 students just in 1 month. So we really are going to need to keep on target with our new schools and also to maintain the facilities that we have now. So thanks to everybody for their support. We are taking applications for the Tax Oversight Committee, Citizens Committee, and those people will be monitoring and reporting to the public how we spend the money. Today at our along with the sales tax, we also got some new board members. So we have kind of a new board starting and moving forward. We have agreed that we are going to look to try to report very carefully how that money is spent school by school. Because one of the things that we did before the election was to have each school make a list of what their needs were. And I think that helped for parents in those communities and citizens in those communities to specifically see what the needs were and to be a little bit more likely then to support. So we were glad about that. We continue with our legislative priorities to advocate with our legislative delegation. And this year, this board, our local priorities are a Grow Your Own Teacher scholarship proposal, and that's in partnership with FGCU and FSW for high school seniors and college juniors and seniors who are willing to go into education and commit then to come back when they finish to teach in the district, because we are dealing with a nationwide teacher shortage. And then we also are asking the legislative delegation to advocate for assistance for us with the general knowledge exam, because potential teachers are having a little bit of difficulty passing that with the mastery level that's required. So there's an ask from us to help with the coursework and the support for that to help people to be able to pass that more easily. And I think because we have such an important to me anyway, presentation this evening. I'm going to end with this, and thank you all for your time. And okay, and I'll hand this back to Scott.
I want to give you a brief update on one other thing that we're working on with our board liaison, Ms. Fisher, in terms of how this committee works. There's been input that's been received from people in general and from the breakout sessions that people want this committee to be more interactive. And we're moving towards there being a formal recommendation process for us to give recommendations to the board, that when folks come here to ask us to approve something, it'll be clearly set out in one of their slides what they're looking for. We'll get that ahead of time. You'll have the opportunity to review that and look at that information. We're going to have a little bit of a more formal process in that. We've asked Ms. Fisher to work with the other members of the school board to determine what exactly it is they're looking for from us. And we're all going to work on making this a more interactive process to make sure that your voices and your thoughts are getting back to the school board and we become an actual advisory committee as opposed to a committee where people come and present information to us and then you take that back to your schools and information's not flowing back to the school board. So that's one of our goals for this year that I want to give everybody an update on. I know people have asked about that, and you should see in your breakout sessions tonight that there's an agenda to go through in there and a little bit more of a structured method to collect your feedback to make sure that's being funneled back up to the board, which, as I understand it, is the purpose of our committee, and we're going to try to encourage that to happen more. With that said, and without further ado, we have our presentation tonight on the district mental health plan from, I guess, Dr. Lori Brooks, and I will let her take it away.
My name is Lori Brooks, and I'm happy to be here this evening. And I'd also like to introduce you, before you sit down, Rick, I'd like to introduce you to our partner in crime, Rick Parfit, our Director of Safety and Security. So he's joining me. And he is going to talk about some additional updates to safety and security after I talk to you about mental health. So, Dr. Harlan, what time do I need to wrap up by? I'm a time person.
By 7 o'clock.
Oh, okay, great. I could talk all night about mental health, so. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's go ahead and dig right in. This is going to be kind of like drinking from the fire hose of mental health initiatives, and I'm going to give you an overview, but there are a lot of legs to this legislation. And it really is a very important initiative that's been a long time coming. I was meeting with some of our community behavioral health partners today, and we are just all really excited about not only the initiatives that we can put in place in our schools, but also the referral pathways for families that would like to engage in some deeper services for their children. So Senate Bill 7026 was comprehensive legislation. It's also known as the Marjory Stoneman Douglas Act, and unfortunately it came out of the February 14th incident at Parkland at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And there are two major legs to this legislation. There is school safety and there is mental health. And as Rick can tell you, the school safety piece had a tighter turnaround for timeline and implementation as far as the initial initiatives. And so he's had to do a lot of work over the summer and last spring leading into August, where with mental health we had a little bit more room to breathe and some ability to really think strategically through and convene a district leadership team to identify where our needs are in order to put the mental health initiatives into place. And that is why, as we are in November, these major pieces are starting to really happen. So this is the same Senate bill. It has two separate funding sources, and there's two seemingly separate but very interrelated initiatives. And what you'll hear from Mr. Parfit as well is we can harden our schools as much as we need to, but if we're not working with our students through some of these challenges, we're really missing the boat on helping our kids here before we, God forbid, get to some type of a safety and security incident. So for mental health, Senate Bill 7026 allotted each district a mental health assistance allocation. It's a recurring allocation, so this is not a grant. It is part of our budget every year. It is based on our unweighted FTE, so we have a price structure per student in our building that will be reoccurring annually. And those funds may not supplant efforts already in place. So we had to build upon the mental health services that we already had in each district. We were encouraged to leverage community partnerships, and that's why if you've been at board meetings or you've been watching the news in the last couple weeks, we had some agreements that were board approved on November 7th, and those are defining our community partnerships. So districts are required to develop a comprehensive mental health plan, and so we did, and ours was board approved by July 31st was the deadline, and ours was board approved, and then we submitted it to the Commissioner of Education on August 1st. We will have annual updates to this plan and resubmission by August 1st every year. And as we really pondered what we should do to truly identify needs and where we needed to best place our allocation funding, we went ahead and convened a multidisciplinary district committee. And we really drilled down into where are our needs. Now this allocation has to focus on what we call our Tier 2 and Tier 3 needs. So our Tier 1 is our universal prevention programs for students. And those programs did not receive additional funding from this allocation. However, our district leadership had already embedded initiatives into this year to grow our programs and ensure that our first layer, our prevention, had additional attention because it's what's good for students. And so we were really fortunate that our leadership had already identified the need for more attention in the prevention areas and positive behavior supports, and then we could focus our allocation on kids that might need more. So as a team, we conducted a needs assessment that identified obviously our needs, our gaps, and our areas for growth. And then we planned our allocation funding to fill those needs. And we followed evidence-based models. So the Department of Education, realizing very quickly that all of our districts were in a position of, it was unknown territory for all of us. We've all had school counselors, social workers, school psychologists. But how do we actually implement mental health in our schools and also connect families that may need access to community resources? So they also convened, as a Department of Education, they convened what they called mental health convenings, and they had superintendents and mental health leads from all of their districts meeting and discussing this with other superintendents and mental health leads. And we really obtained a lot of information. In addition to that, what we did realize and what they highlighted for us is every district is different. And we had to build a plan that suited our needs. And also, we had a lot of evidence-based models available to us around the country. And so they highlighted some of those, and we decided to use some of them. So what do we already know about mental health? We already know that we have master's level school counselors, social workers, and school psychologists in our buildings. And those are, in statute, what they call our school-based mental health professionals. We also have school nurses that are an important part of the team because students present in the clinic many times before they'll present to their counselor or to the social worker. And a school nurse has insight into a lot of the somatic symptoms that may speak about greater needs for the student. Many times parents will talk to the school nurse about health needs that then lead into a mental health discussion. So collectively, these professionals make up our school-based mental health team, and they provide prevention, intervention, and crisis response. They also connect families to community mental and behavioral health when appropriate, and in addition to pediatricians and other medical needs. So we had to stop and caution ourselves, and this has been a statewide caution though, because we're not setting up mental health therapy wings in our schools. We have a limit with our school-based mental health professionals to how far we can go with that. And of course, the parent is always the most important part of that team, along with the student. And so we wanted to really be careful that as we defined our way of work as school-based mental health professionals, that we also know there's a limit to our scope. We also know that mental health follows a tiered approach. You heard me talk about universal prevention programs and then interventions for students. And this is a graphic from the Department of Education that really clearly shows that Tier 1 is universal prevention for all students. What do we want all of our students to know and learn and be able to develop? I always say we can't educate the brain and leave the heart behind. We have to educate the whole student, and we are doing that. And when you hear me talk this evening about Tier 2 and Tier 3 and the mental health allocation, I would like to, in case I forget to articulate this, I'd like you to keep in mind we are still examining our Tier 1 prevention and consistently using that process of continuous improvement to analyze what's working well, where are our gaps there, and what else do we need to be doing for our students in the prevention realm. Tier 2 would be our supplemental or at-risk students. This might be a student who's just stuck in an area. I use the example of a student that may be dealing with the loss of a parent or a grandparent, and we're supporting them through that. They're visiting their counselor, we're working with the family, but they're just really struggling. It may be a year later, and of course grief is a process that really doesn't ever stop. It doesn't go away, but a student may be acting out, and the parent comes to us and says, I'm really having a hard time with this. I think that we need to do more than what we're doing at the school. And so instead of doing some individual touch with the counselor as far as counseling, we might make a recommendation for small group for grief. We may recommend the student go to Valerie's house for some peer-to-peer grief groups, and the parent can also engage. This would be our Tier 2, where we need to get some additional resources. Tier 3 is intensive, and approximately 3% of our students at any given time will exist in Tier 3 because if we're doing our prevention really well, and we also have a small number of students in Tier 2 and we're helping them there, only about 3% of our students should be in Tier 3. And those are students that may need referrals to outside community mental health. So as I said earlier, we identified our gaps, and here's how we address them. So now we're going to get into an overview of the actual board-approved district mental health plan and the initiatives that we've been implementing and continue to move forward with. So we based everything we do on evidence-based practices, and as I mentioned with that graphic, we follow a tiered system of support to help students as the need for services may increase. That's where we're increasing our conversations with parents and also providing wraparound. That was another need that arose in our needs assessment, is we're really good at having conversations with parents, but really how are we following up with them? And if they're having a hard time getting somewhere to access services for their child, are we able to improve the way that we reach back out to the family and say, how can we further assist you? So our first initiative that actually was placed on the table when we convened this multidisciplinary team was, what are we doing at Success Academy? As you're all probably aware, we redesigned Success Academy 3 or 4 years ago. I think we're in our 4th school year of implementation. And one of the services we really wanted to provide our students while they were at Success Academy to help them return to their school with improved skills was access to mental health services as appropriate and provided with parent permission. And so we are contracting with a full-time licensed mental health counselor on campus, and that was part of our meeting today, is they're advertising and hiring now, and we're adding a full-time school psychologist to assist. Then we looked at the average age of onset for a mental health challenge really is ages 12 to 18. And when we look at those national statistics, that would be our middle and high school students. And what do we need to do differently to serve those students? And so we decided, when I mentioned earlier, the wraparound services were largely absent because we didn't have enough staff to do that. And the role of our social workers are family systems. And they do home visits and they work with parents to help them more on the systemic pieces, where the school counselor many times is working directly with the student. We're still talking to parents as counselors, but we're really working directly with the student in the schoolhouse. So we are hiring 10 additional social workers because that would increase their days at high school and middle school level. That provides us a full-time social worker at every high school that's there 5 days a week. That's a service that vastly improves what we have to offer to students and families. At the middle school level, it will increase their days from 2 to 3 to likely 3 to 4, depending on the middle school. And we'd love to get to full-time. That's still something we're leaning into, but we're trying to get to 4 days a week for every social worker at the middle schools. And then we really need to add additional school psychologists. What's happened in Lee County over the years is our school psychologists have a master's degree or higher. They have a highly specialized skill set. And right now what they're having to spend a lot of their time on is evaluations for students that may be in need of exceptional student education services. And we really need to tap into the rest of their degreed skill set. There are a lot of tier 3 interventions they can put into place for students. And so if we can grow our staff, so we're growing by 4 this year, we can tap into that part of their professional degree and skill to help us in the schools with mental health. Now, this is something that I'm coming to realize when I go to meetings around the state, that other districts are starting to look at us. I was at a state convention last week, and we were sharing district to district. And when I said that our district was following what we call the SAMHSA model, it's an evidence-based national model for school-based mental health teams. Other districts started coming up to us and saying, tell us more about that. What are you doing? We need to be doing that. So as we know, with professionals in our buildings, the school counselors, the social workers, the school psychologists, the nurses, they all talk to each other. They're all helping with students. They're trying to consult and collaborate, but this formalizes that process. And we'll be training our school-based mental health professionals in 2 weeks on school mental health teams. What that does is it takes their professional behavior and their inclinations and it formalizes that process. And it says this is an expectation now of the district that you will team regularly, and you will visit and revisit student support plans and case management on a regular basis. Now, as part of that team, what they're going to be doing is also asking, student needs come up from a variety of sources. It could be from a parent, from a student, him or herself, a teacher, one of the mental health professionals, and an administrator. So wherever those needs come up from, we're going to include the student and the parent, the teachers, and their observations, and we're going to really, as Rick has a great expression, collect the dots and connect the dots. We're going to collect all the presenting factors. We're going to discuss them. The parent is a big piece of this because, of course, they have the right and they should have the ability to parent their child and make those decisions. We don't want to do anything that enters in the realm of mental health without parental consent. And so these teams are going to include those people around the table to say, what can we do to further assist this student? And then we're going to develop a support plan, and we're going to monitor that and see how that's working. And if it's working, great. We'll continue to monitor and move forward. And if we need to change things, then we'll ask the parent and the student and everyone else on the team, what else can we do to further assist you? We also have item number 5, our community partnerships via memoranda of understanding. So we have 2 partnerships right now. We developed them with Salus Care. Again, this is the beginning of a multi-year effort. So Salus Care is our community behavioral health agency. They're the largest in Lee County. They are not the only one. However, they are the other government-funded agency that should be partnering with the school district first and foremost. So when I say that we've developed this with Salus Care, it's because our the DOE was telling us that we need to leverage those community partnerships first with those that are government funded. And Salus Care came to the table with a lot of offering to us to help our families. So I'm going to quickly describe to you what our agreements will contain. It used to be in the past that we could help families connect to Salus Care. Now again, families maintain the choice of where they want to go, but if they don't know where to go, or they're asking us, where can I go quickly to access help for my child, we will we'll let them know we have a relationship with Salus Care. We can help the parent fill out the referral right in our office, and we can get that to Salus Care. And Salus Care will call the parent and schedule the appointment. Now in the past, and what our greater community has had to do, no longer Lee County parents, but the community has had to show up when the doors open at Salus Care at 7:30. I think they open at 8, but we have been recommending families line up at 7:30. When the doors open, you stand in line and you get whatever appointments are there that day. And if you get an appointment, you have your appointment and you sit and wait for it. If you don't get an appointment that day, you can sit and hope that someone else leaves and you can slide into that spot, or you can come back the next day at 7:30, stand in line and get an appointment. Now that's because our need is so huge, and Salus Care, Lee County, is the second to last funded mental health county in the state. So we already have systemic issues in the community. And so what this does for our parents is it enables them to get an appointment and manage their workday around an appointment, which is a huge win for our students. And it's a great opportunity for our schools, because that has been the singular greatest barrier for families, is I don't have a whole day to waste, because life is happening while your child is struggling. So this is what we're really excited about. What it will also do is provide two-way communication. Again, it's with parental signature and willingness, but we can communicate forward to Salus Care with their permission that they want an appointment. Salus Care will reach out, have the appointment, and then if the parent, when they present for that appointment with their child, signs the HIPAA release, it will allow, and they control what communication comes back to us, it will allow Salus Care to communicate back to the school. If the child engages in any type of mental health counseling, it allows Salus Care to share with the school, what can we do differently to support that child while they're trying to access services. So all of this hinges on the parent, which is good because it protects everybody's rights, but it's a smoother pathway for families. And then item 6, you may be wondering, what are we doing with our elementary students, because they have needs too. At the elementary level, what we frequently see, and our elementary principals in the room can verify this, we frequently see students that come to school and they have some behaviors that are atypical, and for a few weeks we're trying to figure out, when they're new to us, is it that they haven't learned the social skills they need to be in school just yet and we have to catch them up? Or are they really struggling with the way they process feelings and identifying those emotions? That's a social skill. If as a student I can identify in elementary that when I start to feel tense, I might be angry or I may have anxiety, those are social skills we teach students. But if a student, after learning how to appropriately articulate that and share that without using their hands and instead using their words, still struggles with choosing those appropriate ways to express, that's where we may need assistance for that family. And typically parents are struggling with the same behaviors at home. So in this case, we could talk to the family about some services we have, but really to help us work as elementary schools through some of these behaviors and become even better at identifying what the motive is behind the behavior and helping children identify that and learn that. We are hiring behavior experts to work at the district level that will deploy to elementary schools, that they can help the elementary staff build their skills and capacity beyond where they already are to help some of these children with extreme behaviors. If they're in need of mental health, we'll be able to help the family connect. If it's more that they just need some extra time and some extra intervention at school, that's where the behavior staff will help to build those skills. We do have annual required reporting. Per the DOE, we have to report outcomes and we have to report how we spent our money. And every year we'll resubmit our plan with any tweaks to it, and then also resubmit our reports the following fall. And then in addition to all of these interventions, one of the other pieces of this legislation has been how are we educating our teachers, our administrators, and the non-mental health professionals that already have a degree in mental health. How are we educating our staff to understand what warning signs might be there or what's typical behavior for a student at each developmental age level? What's atypical, and then how do you talk to a student? Now, Youth Mental Health First Aid is a statewide initiative where it's a training for teachers and for administrators. Our goal would be, as we implement everything, to also offer sessions to families. We would like to spread this far and wide, because in Youth Mental Health First Aid, you increase your noticing skills. So you have an education about the 8 most common mental health challenges. There are 8 of them that present in adolescence. They're the most common ones: depression, anxiety, eating disorders, non-suicidal self-injury. We also talk about intervening when you have a student you think may be suicidal. And there are a couple of others. We also have bipolar and paranoid schizophrenia, which are more rare, but they are present in our adolescents. And so participants will be trained on signs and symptoms. They are not to diagnose. That is a big piece of this training. 3 things: noticing skills, what's typical, atypical, when do you want to approach a child or an adolescent, and approach them in a non-threatening way. So they'll talk to you, and then you can connect them to the mental health staff in your school. The other piece to that is reducing stigma. One of the things is we never say, you know, that bipolar kid or that autistic kid, even though autism is not a mental health disorder. But we don't call kids by, we don't say the diabetic kid, do we? We say the student who has diabetes. It changes the way we speak about mental health. It reduces the stigma. We may talk to another teacher and say, my student who has bipolar. We really don't have to say that many times, right? But there are certain mental health is a medical condition. We need to be able to talk about it. It's not a shameful condition, but we tend to call kids by labels or adults by labels when we're talking about mental health. We also have to reduce in our youth these conversations where they'll say like, oh, you're just being bipolar. And we need to really be careful about that. So that's what that training also works with adults about, is reducing the unintentional stigmatizing language. It also talks about a step. It's called the ALGE acronym. How do you approach a student? How do you listen non-judgmentally? How do you reassure them and then connect them to help in the school? So it's a great training, and we also, the DOE chose this training for everyone in the state. But in the meantime, when we were unsure what training they were going to choose for the state, we applied for a grant and received a $375,000 grant to implement this. So we'll be able to train and implement more thoroughly and more quickly than other districts. So we're really excited about that opportunity. We also prepare crisis prevention training as an evidence-based model. This is for our crisis team members whenever we have a student that passes away, or a teacher, or, you know, God forbid, a school-based incident, and we need to deploy grief counselors. This is a more formalized training that we will be implementing with our mental health staff. We also have the mental health team training that I've mentioned throughout this presentation as part of the way of our work with mental health in schools. And then the threat assessment team training, I'm going to let Rick talk about that more, because that falls more under the safety and security piece. But what you're going to notice when Rick talks to you is that there's a lot of cross-teaming with mental health layers with these initiatives in this bill. And so that's just my contact information, which you'll have because that's public record, and I'm sure you have the presentation. So that is my portion about mental health, and we can take questions at the end. In the meantime, though, I'm going to turn it over to Rick Parfit to give you school safety updates.
Thank you. Good evening. As Lori mentioned, this comprehensive legislation came quickly, and there were a number of mandates. And like a lot of legislation, the mandates are pushed through quickly, and sometimes we have to backtrack. We didn't want to get behind, and we wanted to stay ahead of what we were doing and what the laws called for. So we took the approach of the best practices, which the statutes call for, in how we dealt with a few of these issues. The first one that is on the list here, Lori mentioned, the threat assessment teams at every public school. The statute said that, or says that we have to have a threat assessment team at every public school by September 1st. The legislation wasn't passed until March. Didn't take effect, some of it till July. So it didn't give us a lot of time. And it's one thing, to create a team, and we didn't want to create just a team on paper and not have something to back it up. So using that best practice model, we looked and we found a system, and there are actually only a couple of really valid threat assessment systems that are in the country right now. And one of them was the Virginia model, and it actually has a couple different variations. But the Virginia model, based on the Commonwealth of Virginia, was a plan that came about in 2008, of course, after the tragedy in Virginia. And you'll see that the states that have mandatory threat assessment teams, unfortunately, are states that have experienced those types of incidents, like Virginia, Connecticut, Colorado, now Florida, now Texas. So this has been a mandate. Our team, our training, we were able to fund through some additional grant funding, and brought a trainer here, trained 24 trainers in the district. And probably 2/3 of them are district employees, but we also invited our law enforcement partners, our police academy, and so we have about 1/3 of our instructors are law enforcement, because the threat assessment team is that multidisciplinary approach when it comes to that. So we trained, matter of fact, the end of July. It was, I believe it was July 31st. And we got our teams, our trainers trained. We established our teams, and we've been training our teams since then, since school started, I should say. So we started training our teams. Every school in Lee County has to have a team. So we're talking about 85 traditional schools that we have a team. Each team is comprised of, and again, the statutes call for it, best practices call for it, that we have a team comprised of mental health, school administration, law enforcement, and to make a team complete, we're looking at minimum 4 people, 5 people that operate a threat assessment team. So again, that's where we're at. We plan on, by the end of the school year, training probably about 500 people in members of these teams. And I looked at the numbers yesterday. We're almost halfway there with the teams that we've trained. So those schools that have the trained teams have actually implemented some of that skill set. We've actually assisted them in some threat assessments, and I think it'll take some time, obviously, but I think it's a plan that's working. The second one here doesn't really affect the school drastically. The risk protection orders, sometimes referred to as the red flag law. Again, this law has existed in a couple of states that I know of, California, New York, and it gives law enforcement the ability to go to court to present a case to take weapons from an individual that may be dangerous. So without, an arrest, this is a civil process, and the RPOs handled through the state attorney's office. And again, they have to make a case. They have to establish a case. Lee County Sheriff's Office is taking the initiative. They've created a risk protection order unit. I met with them yesterday, and they're moving ahead. They've actually filed maybe 4 or 5 of them already since this law came into effect. And my question was, well, how many juveniles are we dealing with? And they've actually filed and have a couple on juveniles. So it's another added tool that law enforcement has that will, again, benefit us. Not that a school kid can legally own or possess a weapon, but someone in their home can. And we've seen from a number of these incidents over the years that the individuals, the weapons they've obtained basically legally. They've taken them from their home or family members, friends, things like that. So this, the red flag law is yet to be seen how effective it is, but the states that have had it, California, New York, some of the reviews on it have been very good, very positive. The third one, mobile reporting app Fortify Florida. This one took some time. This was supposed to be ready for us by the start of school, and it wasn't ready for us until the end of October, actually. It just, about the last week of October, went live. This app can be downloaded by anybody, not just students, employees. Anybody in the community can download this app, or it can be used as a web-based tool. You can log on to this website, and a person can make a report, either using their name or anonymously, and report concerning behavior, threatening behavior, aberrant behavior of someone, and it asks them to identify, of course, the school district, and these reports will go to law enforcement. They will go to the school administrator. The principles are already built into the system, and it'll go to the security for the school district. So somewhere along those lines, we're all going to get those types of alerts. The nice thing about it is that the app is actually owned by Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and it's built into the system that they will alert law enforcement however they choose to be alerted. And if they don't respond within so much time, it will basically keep alerting them. And it will keep alerting them until somebody acknowledges that this system works. In Lee County, I know from the Sheriff's Office, they have it set up actually right through their 911 system. So there won't be any problem that those tips will be answered. There hasn't been a big rollout yet on this from a marketing standpoint. It's on our webpage with some of the information, but there'll be some marketing that comes out with communications explaining a little bit more about this app. The thing with the idea behind this app is that it will get the information. Now, if you follow this kind of technology, there's a whole lot of these types of devices, these programs that are out there. I mean, it's a cottage industry to have these today. There are so many of them. And there are some of them that are good, some of them that are free, and things like that. So should we say, for example, if we choose to use something different, it doesn't matter, we're still getting that. So when we looked at some type of a system, rather than inundating folks with numerous apps and that type of thing, we're going to use the Fortify Florida app as recommended. The last one on this slide is the FSSAT, the assessment tool, Florida Safe School Assessment Tool. This one again was a mandate with some time constraints. I started in April, and I started getting these notices that these assessments had to be done by July 31st. And not only, that's for every school, and not only that, we had to have the input of law enforcement. Again, 85 traditional schools or whatever, we have to have the input of law enforcement. So I scrambled to try to get the law enforcement before the school year ended, rather than trying to get folks to show up at 85 schools. So we sent this information out. At the time, the sheriff's office was very, very helpful. We got the information that we needed from law enforcement. The assessments were completed, and then just recently, for example, we submitted a district assessment to the school board. And again, this will be an annual type of a deal with the DOE. The Safe School Officer was another a big mandate from this statute, and they changed some language around because everybody was familiar with School Resource Officer. That's typically what we hear of. Well, this language changed it up, and it said every public school has to have a Safe School Officer. Fortunately, for many years, Lee County has been using school resource officers in middle and high schools. After Parkland, the sheriff sent deputies to all of our 48 elementary schools. So we were covered after Parkland by deputies in those schools as well. The statute provided that we either had to have a school resource officer, or the school district had to have their own police, school police, and there are very few of those in the state, or we had to use what was newly created as a guardian, and it was named after the coach that died at Parkland. And the guardian program was basically arming school personnel. It did not allow arming teachers, but it allowed arming school personnel. And should this program be adopted, it has to be approved by the sheriff first. The sheriff of each county has to approve this program before it even can take effect. The school district here and the sheriff decided after consulting that that was not the best practice for us, and we went with the resource officer. This year we changed our school resource officer program. For almost 10 years, the sheriff's office has provided the SROs to all of our schools. And this year we went back to the cities, the city of Cape Coral and the city of Fort Myers. Sanibel's always been one of our SROs, but we went back to the cities. And so, for example, Cape Coral provides 19, I believe, Fort Myers 16, and the remaining are provided by the sheriff's office. So we have law enforcement in all of our schools, and when we looked at this and we looked at deciding what was the best fit for us, we again looked at the pros and cons and what would be the greatest benefit to our schools and our students. And the law enforcement piece of it, the school resource officer, was something that far outweighed in the discussions of what it could do for Lee County schools. You know, the SRO program has evolved over many years, and from what I've found of the history here, we've had SROs in this county in some respects since the mid-'80s. So they've been around for a long time. The SRO program has evolved where they've become more specialized, basically specialized units. There are organizations that train them. The National School Resource Officer Association, the Florida School Resource Officer Association, FASRO and NASRO, and they provide a lot of training. Our requirements are that the school resource officers obviously be properly trained, and they have a 40-hour, the academy here offers a 40-hour school resource officer training. The statute also provides, the new legislation provides that as we're moving forward, these officers also need to be trained in crisis intervention training. And the CIT training, as they refer to it, is something that in Lee County has been offered by NAMI for a number of years. And they've trained, and again, it's another 40-hour course. But where it ties in well with everything that has been said here tonight is that the officers that are trained in the CIT understand well the mental health aspect. They understand some of the cognitive issues of students, some of the behavioral issues. So the CIT trained officers are an important aspect. The language and the changes in the Baker Act have said that in serving, for example, an order to pick up on a Baker Act, that if possible, an officer that's CIT trained be utilized. So the state sees the value in this also as well. The Baker Act's been changed a little bit to allow, for example, officers to seize weapons right away. You know, prior to that, there was no provision in the law that allowed them to do that, and the changes now allow them to at least temporarily remove weapons from individuals that they're picking up on a Baker Act. And for everybody that's somebody that may not be familiar, the Baker Act is just the involuntary hold that psychiatric hold that typically law enforcement or sometimes mental health workers can hold an individual for an evaluation for up to 72 hours. And it's another growing area that we're going to hear a lot of, and we're going to hear with, I think, again, tying back to our mental health plan that we're dealing with. I think we're going to see some real progress in dealing with those kinds of situations. Every school district in the state of Florida has seen increases, or most of them have seen increases in the use of the Baker Acts, and it's probably, the increases have gone on for probably 19 years or so, and you can almost trace it back to the Columbine day forward, where we're seeing a lot more of those types of interventions being used. With the crisis plans that they're working with here, we're hoping that we can maybe avoid some of those kind of situations, that we can get the kids the help they need without taking them into custody and holding them that way. Anything I missed?
In regards to Baker Act, thank you. I mentioned that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And every year we're going to add more and more opportunities, and we're going to diversify as needs come up. Every district is saying that about this good work, that we're at the very beginning. We're in the infancy stages of school-based mental health and connections. Two items that you might want to be aware of, but they're not in place yet, but they have been on the news, and that is that Circuit 20 is getting its first mobile crisis response team. And so when this legislation first passed and we had our first convening, there were districts there that when the state was talking about, oh, do you call your mobile crisis response team? I'm tapping the guy next to me. I'm like, do you have one of those? And he says, I don't know what they're talking about. I said, we don't have one of those. And so we've not had one in Circuit 20. And there were several districts that were like, oh yeah, we call them all the time. And there were other districts saying, we want one. So we are getting one. It was just awarded, and it's the Center for Progress and Excellence is the mental health agency that obtained the grant funding for that. We met with them on Monday. We were able, through Dr. Creel, to secure a letter of support in 24 hours from our superintendent, so thank you for that, to participate in this. It was a very short turnaround on the grant. Anyway, by January, they will have that in place, and the purpose of a mobile crisis response team is to have access to a licensed mental health professional, a peer support specialist, a case manager, and another mental health professional. And when this team is called out, there will be 3 throughout Circuit 20. You probably know Circuit 20 is 5 counties. It's Hendry, Glades, Lee, Collier, Charlotte. That's a lot of territory to cover. But again, because Lee County is so large, they're going to focus a lot of their team allocation on Lee County. They are serving population age 25 and under, and they're focusing on responding to schools during school hours first. They have to respond in 60 minutes, and then we have a backup plan if they are unable to get to our school in 60 minutes, but their whole focus is de-escalation first. So if we have a student in crisis, at the school we're already trying to de-escalate them, but rather than going right to, okay, our only other option is running a Baker Act protocol on a student, now we've got a mobile crisis team that can come in and further de-escalate. By that point, too, the parent has typically arrived at the school because we loop them in early on anything like this, and they can work with the family. If the student has to be Baker Acted, the parent is there. If the student does not need to be Baker Acted because de-escalation was successful, regardless of either way, the Center for Progress and Excellence through this grant provides appointments, case management, and family follow-up immediately. So they've got this service available to them through the mobile crisis response team. So it's another layer of partnership with the school district and other community agencies, really feeling like finally we've got some resources to offer. That's not in place yet. We're writing up, they're writing their plan, and we're writing our agreement to partner with them on that. So January is our target start time. Question? Thank you so much. I'll segue it back over to your chair, and thank you for having us here this evening to talk about this.
If anybody has any questions, if you'd please come up to one of the podiums so that we can pick it up. As you know, we're broadcast, so if you come up to the podium and ask your questions, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Guess I'll start. Dante Chalfie, Fort Myers Technical College. Excellent presentation, and kudos on the collaborative approach that you all are taking. Very excellent. Two quick questions. What % of our budget is allocated to safety? And number two, the FSSAT monetary allocations, are they going to be driven on a per school basis by the ranking on an FSSAT metric of some sort?
First of all, the percentage of the budget, to be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
I can tell you it's growing. The FSSAT risk assessments are not tied to funding. They're just tied to what we would recommend to the school district as what, for example, what needs deficiencies or what we see as needs to be fixed or what needs to be in place. But it does not have a direct funding tied to it. This year there was something in the legislation that allowed, I think, a one-time grant, and it was just a grant for the districts that completed the risk assessments.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because if we have a school that's really hurting for safety and one that's pretty secure, right. I'm just wondering, will monetary allocations be, commensurate right. with their ranking?
Well, that's what the assessment would reveal.
Okay.
Reveal the schools that have the greatest needs, yes. Okay,
and they would get more funding to upgrade their system. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
My question is for you, Lori. I had heard, I work at South Fort Myers High School, and one of the things I had heard was that the high schools were getting master's level social workers as opposed to bachelor's level, which means that we have a lot of fresh faces with master's degrees, and we're giving up experienced bachelor's degrees because, a lot of these bachelor's degrees do go and have been with these families all the way from elementary straight up. And is there any way that we're compensating for the loss of experience in exchange for the education requirement?
That's an excellent question, and I would like to reassure you that our bachelor's level social workers are still working in the district in that capacity. What we've tried to do is strategically allocate all of our social workers. The large majority of those employed are master's level. However, our bachelor's level social workers are amazing, and they have longevity in the district, and they still have a very valuable skill set that we need to continue to employ. And what we're trying to do is provide them with a master's level social worker as kind of a backup call and a Part B person that can come to the school if they have any questions or challenges with working through something. I do have to mention that there is a difference, and I'm telling you things you already know, but just in case there's a question about this, our mental health professionals that are master's level, there's also an added component that they can obtain licensure, and that's not required to work in our school district because that's in any school district, it's not required. So you have master's level school counselors, you have master's level social workers. They may or may not carry licensure because it's a separate credential. And so that's part of our way of work, and other districts has been that we will continue to use our mental health professionals in their capacity. And that is also why our bachelor's level social workers remain employed. They just have another layer and a phone-a-friend, per se, with a master's level social worker should they need to consult or have that person come in to work alongside them on a situation. But they also have the school counselor and the psychologist in the building, and that's where these mental health teams are critical, because you have multiple professionals talking about the issue to make sure we don't miss something and that we cover all the aspects and the opportunities to help a student.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a proud parent at Lehigh Acres Middle School. First, I want to say thank you for the comprehensive presentation tonight, and it is, to me, it's heartwarming to know that mental health is looked at as such a priority. I do have a clarifying question. On your threat assessment team, you said there will be individuals from each school labeled as mental health. I wanted you to say what deems mental health at the school.
As part of the threat assessment team, the mental health as what Lori described. It's the social workers, psychologists, and school counselors.
Okay, so how is there the accountability to assure that those are those that attended? My child's counselor and no one from their counseling team attended the threat assessment. I don't know if the others that attended may have mental health training. However, how are you going to ensure every school that sends it are properly certified mental health individuals?
Well, I know from some of the social workers and psychologists especially, they were being, since they serve so many schools, they were going at different times as far as the training. But the part that they add, the value they add to the threat assessment team is the input of what they deal with from behavior and of a student they may be dealing with. So I'm not sure I get
my question is, if you have a school that did not send any counselors to as a part of a threat assessment team, how are you ensuring that who they choose to bring is deemed mental health?
No, we're requiring they bring their...
But what is your plan to ensure that that is occurring? Like my child's school counselor said they did not attend, and no school counselors from this school attended that training. So I'm asking, what is your plan?
Well, she's one of the bosses, and one of the other bosses we have are making sure that and like I said, they may not have gone with the rest of their team. Our goal was that they attend with the team. That was the best case scenario.
So you have a plan to ensure every school's mental health, even if it's not the day that they went as a team, that they will attend?
Yes.
Thank you.
A couple of our schools were reluctant to release all mental health professionals from their building because they really feel a responsibility to have one individual to cover in case we have a student that's in crisis or any other need. So that's where we do have additional days. Our recommended practice is they train as a team. However, when this came up as a concern, and we knew it would, also making sure that we have additional days for those mental health professionals to go to another training date, and then they can join their team with that. So it's likely the social worker, school psychologists from your school have already been trained, and that the school counselors will be coming to one of our other training dates to get trained. But the expectation is, yes, they will all be trained over the course of this school year.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diane Mallman, and I'm representing Challenger Middle. My question, you were saying that there's an SRO or something in every school. Is there a ratio to the number of those compared to the population of the school? Is there just one in every school?
Well, initially the language that was being debated was that if a school was larger than 2,000, they would have more than one SRO. That didn't become part of the legislation, but that's still a best practice. So our plan was, working with the sheriff's office, that those schools that have 2,000 or more students have 2 SROs. So yes, we have about 6 schools that have 2.
Okay, and then very quick question. I'm a retired teacher here in Lee County. I've never heard of the Success Academy. Is that just a new name for something?
We redesigned our alternative learning center program to be more restorative, and also when students are going to the Success Academy, when we recommend a relocation from a home school, and it's our middle and high school students that may be recommended to Success, it is with the expectation through this redesigned program that we are helping those students on all aspects, not just educationally or behaviorally, but also we have mental health needs that parents are bringing to the table and saying, I need help, I want help. And we thought that that was a layer we intended to put in place with the redesign, and we continued to lack the funding for it, and this legislation really assisted with it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Amelia Cepeda, Three Oaks Middle School. I was just wondering, the agreement with Salus Care, if a parent were to have a concern with a child during the summer months, has consideration been given to having that same agreement with Salus Care so you don't have to go through that very lovely walk-in process?
So you just highlighted a need, and I appreciate that. I will put that on my list. One of the best parts of developing these relationships is to better serve our youth, and it's not just during school day, school time, or during the summer. We do need to have a plan. The challenge that we will have, but we will work on this, is our school-based mental health professionals work the calendar year for the school calendar. And so what we will do, and I'll put it on my to-do list, is address that, because Salus Care, again, has really helped us beyond, I'm going to be honest with you, beyond anything that I thought I could ask for. They have come to the table huge, and they have really worked well with us. So I'll put that on the list.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, I did not mention to you, and I know we're out of time probably, and I apologize. For the threat assessment team, we talked about mental health professionals participating on the threat assessment team as well. And another agreement we have with Salus Care is, as we are working through a student that comes up as a concern, and it may be it will be through then the threat assessment team if there is a question about the safety and security of the school. If it comes up that we and the parent really feel that a mental health assessment is required, and we've worked with some families where the parents have said, I am scared for my child, I need help and I need it now. The other agreement we have with Salus Care is an expedited turnaround on an assessment. So if the threat assessment team meets with the parent and says, we really recommend that you get an assessment done to really get a feel for where your child is with their mental health and wellness, it will be a 2-day turnaround time on that. And that way we can make a case management plan and ensure the student is doing okay and ensure the safety and security of the school is addressed. Because many times when students come up as a safety concern to others, when the threat assessment teams following the Virginia model get to the point that they interview a student, most students are actually feeling so hopeless they're suicidal. And we have to address that and help them work through that and help families. So it'll be a quicker turnaround time.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We're going to, at this time, we're going to go to our breakout sessions. Our speakers, is my understanding, are going to come around to the breakout sessions to answer your questions there that are maybe more specific to the individual groups, so they'll be making their way around to those. Everybody could be back at 7:45 for our breakout session reports, and I'll see you all then. Thank you. And if our session leaders or chairs could come get the books here from our wonderful secretary.
Sure. For the high school gets a chance to talk, because we never get people to come in and it's like really.
Okay, absolutely.
Get so confused, high school, that's right. See, I haven't done this in a long time, and this is just my temporary thing.
Good evening, everybody. It looks like we're mostly back, so we're going to go ahead and start with our high school breakout report.
Well, we had a wonderful time. We were very busy. We had a special presentation from the Uncommon Friends, FGCU. They're having a competition among students on ethics and business, and they're going to present them with, they're going to give a competition by zones, and then a competition at FGCU, and even give away, last year they gave away scholarships. So a lot of our time was taken up with that. We talked about SROs in the Fort Myers Technical College. We requested more information on Fortify. A lot of us didn't know about Fortify, Florida. And so we were just making sure we weren't the only ones. And then how is the rotation of sporting events for the district being planned? For example, hosting a golf event. And we've presented that question. Specialty programs. Do students know what is the expectation in the IB, the ACE, the AP, and the dual enrollment? For example, IB Cambridge, what's the needs for the program and graduation, and what seniors need for graduation? Are all schools required to talk to all students at all levels of high school in a group setting or individual with counselors? And then we also had Mr. Parfit come in and answer more questions, and Ms. Fisher came in as well. So that's high school.
And now we'll hear from our elementary school breakout.
Well, first, thanks to Cedric leaving me again. Andy has now joined me as, today he was chairman of the elementary group. And Lori joined us at the end, so we only have 3 outstanding items. One, we asked, do charter schools get any of the half-penny sales tax money? 2, are Tier 2 and Tier 3 kids being tracked, and how well are they tracked when they move schools, either purposely because we're elementary, or when they're advancing grades out of elementary? And then there was a lot of discussion about the new enrollment plan and how well it really addresses them moving, because last year we were told about how it addresses middle and high school students being able to move, not so much elementary. And then the third was about the prevention team addressing ratios in school, about the prevention team ratios in schools and how that is being addressed effectively. For example, 1,400 kids to 1 counselor, because that's quite a workload. And we have some schools that have that exact size going on. So those were our 3 outstanding issues.
We will get you in.
And now last but not least, we'll have our middle school breakout report.
Anyway, hold on.
Hi. What we talked about is mostly security, and one of the questions was, when will the video camera project for school entry be completed? Mr. Parfit was available to answer. It's a work in progress with high demand throughout the state, and they're having to retrofit some schools to get a single point of entry. High schools are first. The other question is, how is security addressed when portables require multiple entrances to be open? They're looking into card access for doors in these situations. Another option is to have someone monitor those doors. No plans for additional metal detectors at schools at this time. The other question is, what is the plan to balance HIPAA, FERPA, federal laws regarding privacy with school security? Some of the things that parents want is for communication to go out as quickly as possible, and of course the schools want accurate information to go out. That can take some time. Suggestions were made from the group that even if the whole story can't be put out there, could messages be sent out saying we're aware of the issue and are assessing the situation. Oops. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for the other side. Another question, what are the expectations of SROs? Are they required to do rounds and monitor all areas of the school? The answer was yes. All staff are monitoring cameras throughout the day. Another question is, why can't teachers have a two-way radio or some kind of communication device in their classroom? We're waiting for an answer on that. And the last question was, has any thought been given to how secure schools with open courtyards or open campuses can be accessed from the roof of buildings? We're also waiting on an answer for that.
Well, thank you very much. Time now for public comment. If we have any members of the public who would like to comment on an issue they think is important to DAC that is not a DAC member. Seeing none, does anybody have anything for the good of the order? Two things. One, I'll tell you that our next DAC meeting is January 16th of 2019. We do not have a meeting next month in December, and at this time I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Amelia Cepeda, 3 Oaks Middle School.
We have a second as well.
Bethany Schiavone, Bonita Springs High School.
All in favor? Everybody have a great holiday season.
Thank you.